Darnell tightened his grip on the basketball, feeling the rough texture against his fingertips. He had been here before, new town, new team, same stairs. It didn't take a genius to figure out what they were thinking. Blake, the team captain, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, watching Darnell like a predator sizing up its prey. The other guys weren't much different. Some of them whispered to each other, snickering under their breath. Coach Miller, sensing the tension, clapped his hands. "All right, enough standing around. Darnell, grab a jersey. You're running with the second unit today." A few groans echoed through the gym. One of the seniors, Matt, rolled his eyes. "Coach, you sure about that? We don't even know if he can keep up." Darnell didn't react. He'd heard worse. Instead, he pulled the jersey over his head and jogged onto the court. 5-on-5, full court, Coach barked. "Let's go." The game started at a brutal pace. Darnell wasn't just playing against his own teammates, he was fighting for respect. Every pass, every screen, every drive to the hoop came with a little extra. Harder hits. Rougher fouls. More whispers. "Watch yourself, rookie. Must be different from those Chicago street courts, huh?" Darnell ignored it. He let his game talk. Then it happened. A fast break. Darnell got the ball, cutting through defenders like a blade through water. He soared up for a layup when suddenly Blake slammed into him midair. Hard. The impact sent Darnell crashing to the floor, his back slamming against the hardwood with a sickening thud. Silence. Blake stood over him, smirking. "Oops." Coach's whistle shrieked, but the damage was done. Darnell gritted his teeth, pushing himself up. His ribs ached. His palms stung. But his pride? Untouched. He met Blake's gaze, and for the first time that night, he smiled. Game on. Darnell didn't need to say a word. The way he stood, the fire in his eyes, that was enough. He dusted himself off, rolled his shoulders, and jogged back into position. Blake expected him to get mad, to throw a punch, to lose his cool. He didn't. Instead, he locked in. Coach blew the whistle. "Run it back." The game resumed, but this time, Darnell wasn't just playing, he was proving a point. He moved faster, sharper, and with precision that made even the seniors scramble to keep up. First play, Matt tried to drive past him. Not happening. Darnell read him like a book, cutting off his lane and forcing a bad pass. Second play, Blake went for a contested jumper. Darnell timed his lead perfectly, his fingertips grazing the ball, forcing it off course. Third play, his moment came. A steal at half court. Darnell exploded down the lane, defenders scrambling to stop him. Blake was right there, waiting, ready to hit him again. But Darnell wasn't falling for it this time. He shifted midair, twisting his body, and instead of going straight up, he dished a lightning-quick behind-the-back pass to a teammate. The ball snapped into Matt's hands, and before Blake could recover, swish. Bucket. The gym went silent. Coach blew the whistle, but he wasn't hiding his grin. "All right, that's enough. Hit the showers." Darnell walked off, sweat dripping from his forehead, but his expression was calm. He didn't need to celebrate. The message was clear, he wasn't some pushover they could scare off. As he grabbed his bag from the bench, Blake walked past him, lowering his voice. "This ain't over." Darnell just smirked. Didn't think it was. Blake wasn't just talking about basketball. And Darnell knew it. Darnell walked into practice the next day knowing exactly what was coming. He could feel it the moment he stepped into the gym, the stares, the hushed whispers, the unspoken challenge. They weren't done with him. Not even close. Blake and Matt stood by the free throw line, stretching, but their eyes followed him. The rest of the team wasn't much different. Some smirked. Others pretended he wasn't even there. Coach Miller blew his whistle. "All right, bring it in." The team circled up, but Darnell knew this wasn't just a practice. This was a test. "Scrimmage today," Coach announced. "Let's see who wants it." Darnell tightened his grip on his jersey. He already knew what that meant. It was open season. The game started at full intensity. No warm-up. No easing in. From the first possession, Darnell was a target. Blake and Matt made sure of it. First play, Matt set a hard screen, way harder than necessary. Darnell barely had time to brace before the impact sent him stumbling. Blake smirked. "Gotta call that out, rookie." Darnell pushed himself up, brushing it off. No complaints. No reaction. Second play, Darnell caught the ball at the top of the key. The moment he turned, Blake's forearm slammed into his chest, sending him a step back. "No easy buckets," Blake muttered. Third play, Darnell drove to the basket, cutting through defenders, eyes locked on the rim. He took flight for a layup. Wham! Blake crashed into him midair, sending him sprawling to the floor. The impact rattled his spine, pain shooting through his back. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself up. The gym was dead silent. Blake stood over him, hands on his hips. "Maybe sit this one out, Chi-Town." A few chuckles rippled through the team. Coach's whistle blew. Enough. Darnell exhaled slowly, getting to his feet. He met Blake's gaze, fire burning in his eyes. He wasn't quitting. He wasn't backing down. He was about to make them regret every second of this. Darnell didn't just play. He took over. Next possession, Matt tried to drive past him. Darnell locked him down, forcing a bad pass. "Clamp him up, rookie," one of the reserves called from the bench, laughing. Darnell didn't even crack a smile. He wasn't here for jokes. Then came his moment. A sloppy pass from Blake, Darnell pounced, snatching the ball midair. He exploded down the court, pure speed. Blake was right behind him. Darnell saw him in his peripheral vision. He knew what was coming. Blake was going to foul him again. But Darnell had already decided. He wasn't taking another hit. As Blake lunged for the block, Darnell shifted in midair, switching the ball to his left hand and spinning past him. Blake whiffed. The crowd gasped. Darnell floated up, soft touch, swish. Bucket. The gym erupted. Blake hit the floor, staring up in disbelief. Darnell? He was already jogging back, calm, collected, like nothing had happened. The message was clear. "You can't stop me." Coach blew the whistle. "That's it. Hit the showers." Darnell grabbed his bag from the bench, sweat dripping down his face, but his heart steady. "Blake?" He wasn't smirking anymore. As Darnell walked past, Blake muttered, "This ain't over." Darnell didn't even look at him. Didn't think it was. Because for the first time, Blake wasn't just talking about basketball. And Darnell knew it. The locker room was tense. Darnell could feel the stares, the unspoken challenge hanging in the air. He kept his head down, lacing up his sneakers, but he wasn't stupid. He knew how this worked. He'd been in places like this before, new team, new town, same story. The real test wasn't just on the court. It was what happened after. Matt was the first to break the silence. Man, that was some lucky-ass defense out there. Darnell didn't bother responding. He'd learned a long time ago that silence was more powerful than words. "Yo, I'm talking to you, rookie," Matt pressed, stepping closer. Blake, still fuming from the game, leaned back against the lockers with a smirk. He didn't need to say anything. The others were already falling in line, setting the tone. Darnell stayed calm. He grabbed his bag and stood up, looking Matt right in the eye. "You done?" The room went still. Matt chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, you got a mouth on you, huh? Maybe Coach should have warned you, we got traditions here." Darnell knew exactly where this was going. You mean hazing? He said flatly. Matt's grin widened. Nah, just a little team bonding. The guys laughed. Blake didn't move, but Darnell could see it in his eyes. This wasn't just about some dumb locker room ritual. It was about power. Control. Y'all do this to everybody? Darnell asked. Matt shrugged. Nah. Just the ones who don't know their place yet. Darnell exhaled slowly. He could play along. He could take the punches, let them feel like they'd won. Or he could push back. But before he could make his choice, Coach Miller's voice cut through the room. Everybody out. Silence. Blake scowled. Coach. I said out, Miller snapped. The guys muttered under their breath but grabbed their stuff. Blake shot Darnell a final look before slamming his locker shut. Darnell stayed back as the others left, adjusting the strap on his bag. Coach Miller leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. How bad was it? He asked. Darnell shrugged. Seen worse. Coach sighed, rubbing his temple. Look, kid. You got talent. I see it. But you gotta be smart. Blake and his boys? They've been running this team for years. You coming in here and showing them up? That ain't gonna sit right. Darnell met his gaze. I ain't here to sit right. I'm here to play. Coach smirked, shaking his head. Then you better be ready. 'Cause they're just getting started. Darnell already knew that. The only question was, how far were they willing to go? The locker room after practice felt different. Darnell could feel the tension, thick like the humidity before a storm. He was supposed to be quiet. He was supposed to be humble. He was supposed to lose. But he didn't. And that changed everything. Blake sat in front of his locker, jaw tight, staring at the floor. His crew, Matt, Ryan, and a couple of the seniors, weren't laughing anymore. Nobody was. Darnell kept his head down, untying his sneakers, but his senses were sharp. He knew how these things went. The real fight? It never stayed on the court. It always spilled into something else. Yo, rookie, Matt called, stretching his arms like he wasn't about to start something. That spin move was cute. You practiced that in front of a mirror or something? A couple of weak chuckles from the bench. Darnell didn't answer. Blake leaned forward, finally speaking. Yeah, you got lucky today. Darnell exhaled, shaking his head. Lucky? He turned to face Blake. You want to run it back right now? The room went dead quiet. Blake's eyes darkened. He wasn't used to people challenging him, especially not like this. Matt stood up, stepping closer. You got a little too much energy, rookie. Darnell met his gaze, unblinking. Nah. Y'all just don't like the fact that I ain't scared of you. Matt's smirk twitched. You sure about that? He took another step forward. Darnell didn't move. Then. All right, knock it off, Coach Miller's voice cut through the tension. Everyone froze. Coach stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He wasn't asking. Out. Now, he ordered. Nobody argued. Not even Blake. One by one, the team filtered out. But as Blake walked past Darnell, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for him to hear. This ain't over. Darnell just smiled. Didn't think it was. Blake didn't reply. He didn't have to. By the time Darnell stepped outside, the sky had turned dark, the parking lot mostly empty. His breath was still steady, but his mind was racing. Blake wasn't just mad, he was embarrassed. And guys like him? They didn't take embarrassment lightly. Darnell had just reached his bike when he heard it. Footsteps. Not just one set. Multiple. He didn't turn around right away. He knew better. He just exhaled, adjusting the strap on his bag. Then. A shove. Not hard enough to knock him down. Just enough to send a message. Where you rushing to, Chi-Town? Darnell finally turned. Blake. Matt. Two of the seniors. All standing in a half-circle around him. Darnell took his time, glancing at each of them before meeting Blake's eyes. You really need backup for this? He asked, voice calm. Matt scoffed. Man, shut up. Blake tilted his head. You don't get it, do you? Darnell crossed his arms. Nah, I get it. You're pissed 'cause I showed you up. You're pissed 'cause I ain't scared of you. Blake's jaw clenched. You don't belong here, he said finally. Darnell stepped forward, closing the space between them. Then stop me. The silence stretched. For a second, Darnell thought Blake might actually throw a punch. Then, yo! A voice cut through the night. Coach Miller. Again. Darnell saw the shift immediately. The way Matt and the others took half a step back. The way Blake tensed. Coach walked toward them, eyes sharp. You want to tell me what's going on here? Silence. Nobody spoke. Blake's jaw worked, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Coach turned to Darnell. You good? Darnell nodded. Yeah. Coach looked back at Blake. Go home. All of you. Now. No one argued. But as Blake turned to leave, he gave Darnell one last look. And this time? There was no smirk. Just something darker. Something dangerous. Something that told Darnell. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Coach Miller sighed, rubbing his temple. Damn idiots. Darnell shifted his bag onto his shoulder. They ain't gonna stop. Coach nodded, looking at him seriously. You're right. They're not. Darnell waited. Coach hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. Blake's been running this team for years. I know his type. He's not mad 'cause you're good, he's mad 'cause you're better than him. Darnell's expression didn't change. Yeah, I figured that out. Coach exhaled. You gotta be smart. Darnell met his gaze. I am. Coach studied him for a moment, then shook his head with a small, knowing smirk. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? Darnell finally let out a small grin. Yeah. I get that a lot. Coach chuckled, then patted his shoulder. Get some rest, kid. Tomorrow's a big game. Darnell nodded and started walking toward his bike. But as he rode off into the night, one thought kept circling in his mind. Blake wasn't just mad. He was desperate. And desperate guys? They were the most dangerous ones. Darnell didn't sleep much that night. He didn't need to. He'd been through this before, new school, new team, same old story. But something about this place felt different. More dangerous. The next morning, as he walked into the gym for early practice, he felt it immediately. The tension. The silence. Something was off. Then he saw it. His locker was open. His basketball shoes, gone. His jersey? Ripped in half and stuffed inside. A slow anger burned in his chest, but he didn't react. That's what they wanted. Blake, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, smirked. Problem, rookie? Darnell exhaled, shaking his head. This is weak, man. Matt chuckled. We call it a warning. Coach wasn't around. Nobody to stop them now. Darnell stepped forward, locking eyes with Blake. He wasn't going to back down. You scared, huh? Blake's smirk faded. What did you just say? I said you scared, Darnell repeated, voice steady. You don't mess with dudes who can't play. You only pull this on threats. A murmur went through the team. The way Darnell said it, calm and direct, it wasn't just a response. It was a challenge. Blake's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being called out like that. You think one good practice makes you something? He took a step closer. You don't belong here, man. This ain't Chicago. You don't get to come in here and take what's ours. Darnell stared at him, unblinking. Then stop me. The room went dead silent. Blake clenched his fists. For a second, it looked like he was about to swing. But then he forced a smile. Not yet. He leaned in slightly. We got a big game Friday. Maybe you make it there. Maybe you don't. With that, he turned and walked away, his crew following behind. Darnell stayed put, his heartbeat steady. He knew what was coming. This wasn't just trash talk anymore. They were going to make sure he paid for stepping onto their court. And he was ready for it. The threats didn't take long to turn real. By Wednesday, Darnell had dealt with it all, shoved during drills, knocked down harder than necessary, and even found his practice jersey drenched in something foul. But he didn't react. He let his game do the talking. Every practice, he outworked them. Every scrimmage, he shut them down. It wasn't just about proving himself anymore. It was about sending a message, you can't break me. But Blake wasn't done yet. Thursday night, Darnell stayed late in the gym, getting up extra shots. By the time he walked out into the cold night air, the parking lot was mostly empty. Mostly. He barely had time to register the sound of footsteps before someone shoved him, hard, into the chain-link fence. Darnell spun around, fists clenched, already knowing who it was. Blake. Matt. A couple of their boys. You just don't get it, do you? Blake's voice was low, dangerous. You don't belong here, man. You don't walk in and act like you run this team. Darnell wiped his mouth, unfazed. Then beat me on the court. Blake chuckled. See, that's the thing. I don't need to. 'Cause you ain't playing tomorrow. Matt stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. You should have just backed off, man. Darnell exhaled. His body tensed. He wasn't scared, but he knew this was bad. 4-on-1? This wasn't a fair fight. Then, out of nowhere. Yo! A voice cut through the tension. Coach Miller. Blake and his boys stepped back as the coach stormed toward them, his face like thunder. You want to tell me what the hell is going on here? Silence. Nobody spoke. Blake wasn't stupid. He knew getting caught here could cost him everything. Coach's eyes darted between them before landing on Darnell. You good? Darnell nodded, breathing steady. Yeah. Coach turned to the others. Get out of here. Now. Blake held Darnell's gaze for one last second before backing off. See you tomorrow, rookie. As they walked away, Coach let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head. Damn idiots. He looked back at Darnell. You sure you're okay? Darnell nodded again. He was fine. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, he was going to end this. Friday night. Packed gym. The energy in the air was electric. This wasn't just any game, it was the biggest rivalry of the season. Stands filled with students, parents, and alumni. Banners waving. The Wolves, Darnell's team, were expected to dominate. But inside that locker room, it wasn't just about winning. It was about him. Darnell sat in silence, tying his shoes, focused. Across from him, Blake was watching. Waiting. He hadn't said a word since last night. He didn't have to. Everyone knew what this game was about. Coach Miller clapped his hands. All right, listen up. You know what's at stake. Play hard, play smart, and for the love of God, play as a team. Darnell felt the weight of that last line. Coach wasn't stupid, he knew there was tension, but he also knew what Darnell could do. Blake stood up, rolling his shoulders. Let's go eat. The team stormed out onto the court. Tip-off. The game was brutal from the start. Blake and Matt made sure to remind Darnell exactly where he stood, elbows in the ribs, hard screens, a couple of accidental trips. But Darnell? He was locked in. First quarter, he kept it simple. Played solid defense. Kept the ball moving. He didn't need to force anything. He was waiting. Second quarter, the other team started pressing. That's when he made his move. Blake drove to the basket, thinking he had an easy layup. Not tonight. Darnell exploded off the floor, meeting him at the rim, swat. Ball sent flying into the stands. The crowd lost it. Blake hit the floor, staring up in shock. Darnell didn't even look at him. Just turned and jogged back down the court. The Wolves bench erupted. Coach? Smiling. Blake? Furious. Halftime. The Wolves were up by 6, but the locker room was dead quiet. Blake was pacing, breathing hard. You think this is your team now? He finally snapped, pointing at Darnell. You think one good half means anything? Darnell stood up, calm. You scared? Blake laughed, shaking his head. You really don't get it. This ain't just about ball. Darnell stepped closer. It is for me. For a second, Blake just stared at him. Then he muttered, We'll see. He stormed out. Third quarter. The other team came out swinging, cutting the lead down to 2. Tension was high. Then, it happened. Fast break. Darnell caught the pass, full speed toward the basket. He rose up for the dunk. And Blake took him out. Mid-air collision. Darnell crashed hard, pain exploding through his back. The gym went silent. Coach was already screaming. The refs blew their whistles. Blake stood over him, chest heaving. For a second, it looked like he was about to say something. Maybe even apologize. But then, he smirked. That was it. That was the moment. Darnell got up slowly, ignoring the pain. The ref signaled, flagrant foul. Crowd booing. Coach yelling. Blake fuming. But Darnell? He just walked to the free throw line. Took a breath. And smiled. Game on. The crowd was electric. The gym shook with boos and cheers, but Darnell didn't hear any of it. He stood at the free throw line, gripping the ball, feeling the weight of everything that led to this moment. Blake was still smirking from the foul, standing with his hands on his hips. He thought he had one. Darnell bounced the ball once. Twice. Took a deep breath. Then, swish. First free throw, perfect. Blake's smirk faltered. Darnell took the second shot. Nothing but net. Tie game. The Wolves bench exploded with energy. Blake muttered something under his breath, shaking his head. 4 minutes left. Darnell wasn't done. Next possession, he locked Blake up on defense, forcing a turnover. The crowd roared as he snatched the ball and took off down the court. 2 defenders closed in. He didn't hesitate. A quick crossover, then a behind-the-back pass to Matt the bucket. Blake cursed under his breath. Darnell jogged back on defense, locking eyes with him. Still think I don't belong? Blake didn't answer. Final minute. Wolves down by 1. Coach called timeout, drawing up the final play. We need a bucket. Blake's gonna be all over you, so find the open man, Coach said, looking straight at Darnell. Darnell nodded, but inside? He knew how this was going to end. Clock ticking. 10 seconds left. Blake shadowed Darnell, arms spread wide. You ain't winning this, rookie. Darnell ignored him. 9 seconds. He dribbled to his left. Blake was quick, cut him off. 7 seconds. He hesitated, then exploded to his right. Blake lunged, too late. 5 seconds. Darnell reached the paint. The defense collapsed on him. No time for a pass. 3 seconds. He planted his foot, rose up, Blake jumped with him. 2 seconds. Contact. But Darnell adjusted mid-air, twisting his body. 1 second. He let it fly. Buzzer. The ball kissed the backboard, rolled around the rim. And dropped. Game over. The gym erupted. Darnell hit the floor, his teammates swarming him, shouting his name. Blake stood frozen, staring at the scoreboard. Wolves win. The locker room was a storm of energy. Teammates cheered, slapped Darnell's back, and replayed his game-winning shot like it was straight out of a movie. "You cooked him, bro." Matt laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. Blake looked shook. Darnell smirked but stayed quiet, just peeling off his jersey. He knew the job was done. The respect? Earned. But not from everyone. Blake sat alone on the other side of the room, staring at the floor. He hadn't said a word since the final buzzer. Then, without looking up, he muttered, "One shot doesn't change anything." Darnell turned. "You're right," he said. "But everything before it did." Blake clenched his jaw. For a second, it looked like he might get up, start another fight. But then, he just exhaled. Like he finally understood something. And then? He stood up. Walked past Darnell. Paused at the door. "You got lucky," Blake said, but there wasn't as much bite in his voice this time. Darnell smirked. "Nah. I earned it." Blake didn't argue. He just walked out. A quiet truce. Not friends. Not enemies. But something different. Coach Miller leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. "Hell of a shot, kid," he said. "Hell of a night." Darnell grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "Yeah," he said with a small grin. "It was." Then he walked out into the cool night air. He wasn't just on the team anymore. This was his team now.